Let the beauty of the season remind you that inspiration is always waiting to be discovered. This is the inspiration from Sonnet Garden Bloom's July Maker's Box. Hi, I'm Sylvia with Backyard Brushes in Fountain City, Wisconsin. And in today's video, we are going to transform 4 items I got from a flea market or a thrift store using the products from Sonnet's July Maker's Box. From Recycled Decoupage paper, we have Bluebird & Company and the Aviary Archives Masterboard. From Connie, the Painted Photographer, Postmarked Blue, and Bohemian Bluebird. For Sweet Pickins Milk Paint, we'll be using Providence. And from DIY Paint, Gravel Road and Bohemian Blue. For Fusion Mineral Paint, Chateau and Liberty Blue. And Sonnet always includes a nice napkin along with her digital press. So let's roll up our sleeves and let's get creating. For project 1, I am using this old cement paver. I picked it up at a flea market and I paid, I believe, $1 for it. I love transforming old tools and giving them a new life. I wanted to remove the majority of the rust, so I soaked the metal in vinegar. I was only going to soak it for like a day, but life got in the way, so I did soak it for about 3 days. I usually mix it with water. And then one of my viewers is like, just use straight vinegar. And you know what? It did work really slick. I removed the tool from the vinegar. And I always use these disposable trays from like the restaurants for takeout. And I used a baby wipe just to help remove all that excess rust. And it came off really well. I did have to use a little bit of my elbow. And you can see here where it just took that rust right off. I did spray it with some Rust-Oleum clear coat in order to minimize the opportunity of the rust seeping through the decoupage paper. I mixed up some of the Providence milk paint with a 1-to-1, approximate 1-to-1 ratio, and I did give the coat or the handle 2 coats of paint. Once that was dry, I did use Rust-Oleum chiffon, and I painted the front of the planer. I had cut out one of the bluebirds from the masterboard from Royce. I sprayed it with some water, and I chose to try out the Fusion Transfer Gel for my decoupage medium. I gave the planer, the metal, 1 coat of the decoupage gel, and I placed the bird, decoupage paper, and I just used my fingers and gently pressed it into place. And I did let it dry. I tried to move it minimally when it's all wet. I gave the bird a top coat of the Fusion gel. And using my finger sander, which I can also link in the description below, I love this tool. I just used an up and down motion. I went around the whole planer and the decoupage paper comes right off. Using the Fusion Antiquing Gel, I coated the handle. I let it sit for about 10 to 20 minutes, and then I used a paper towel to remove the excess gel. And the Sweet Pickins Milk Paint was sealed. For project 2, I chose this wood piece from a pulley, and I believe I paid $3 for it from a local flea market. And I did wash it and I sanded it so it was a little smoother. I used a hand sander. And then I used Bohemian Blue by DIY, and I gave the sides, the inner piece of the circle, and the bottom of the wood piece with the Bohemian Blue from DIY. And I always complete the bottom and the backs of my projects. I feel like it just makes it more complete. Using the Chiffon by Rust-Oleum chalk paint, I coated the top part of the, I don't know what to call it, wood round. I did use the wet method to create like a jagged lines on the edge of the rice paper. And then I sprayed it with the water to help loosen the fibers. And I used the Fusion transfer gel as my decoupage medium, and I adhered the rice paper to the top of the wood round. I had the jagged edges, so I was going to attempt to blend paint in, and the jagged edges blend in a lot easier than a straight line. Your eyes aren't drawn to the jagged edges as easy as it is to the straight line. And I learned that from Tara from the Reclaimed Ranch. So I pulled out the colors from the box and I kind of tried tapping out and matching up my colors. And it is easier with Connie using DIY paints when she paints the images for her rice paper. And then I'm like, I have all this extra rice paper on the top that I'm going to be taking off. So I just ripped some pieces of that paper right off, and using the Fusion Decoupage gel, I adhered them to the sides of the wood round. I used a scissors to cut a hole into the center, and I used my sanding sponge to sand off the excess paper using the Fusion antiquing oil. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm using the Fusion transfer gel to actually decoupage the pieces onto the edge to just make it look a little bit more cohesive. And I just used the scrap pieces from the wood round. Once they were applied, I used my Weathered Wood by DIY and I watered it down a little bit, and I did a little flicking of the paint to help blend in the paper. I covered the top part with the Fusion Decoupage gel, let it dry, then using an up and down motion with the sanding paper, I removed the excess paper. Then using the Fusion antiquing gel, I went around the edges randomly of the wood round and the edges of the decoupage paper, just to give it kind of that worn look. And then I wiped off and smeared, I guess more smeared than wiped off, the gel, just for that, more of that old antique vintage feel. And I also did the inner circle in the same manner. And I also sealed the DIY paint inside with the decoupage gel. To seal the project, I am using the antiquing gel all the way around the sides. And I'm wiping off the inside gel. And I just painted the edges and also the bottom because I always finish my projects off. I let it sit for about 10 minutes and then I wiped off the excess gel. DIY paint does need to be sealed. And I just thought this would make a really cute riser. For project 3, I am using this, I believe it was an old handmade cutting board. I'm not quite sure, but I paid $3 for it at a flea market. I used my hand sander to sand the board, and I used the sponge sander to take off some of that excess paint on the handle. Using the DIY gravel road, I gave the handle and the sides of the board 2 coats of the DIY paint, and I also painted the bottom of the board. And when I had saw this board at the flea market, I thought it would make a really fun riser. Using Chiffon by Rust-Oleum chalk paint, I painted the top part of the board. Once the gravel road had dried, and the chiffon, once the paint had dried, I did paint the bottom with the Liberty by Fusion. Using Vaseline, I randomly spread Vaseline on the sides of the board and also on the handle. I like using Vaseline when I'm layering paint, as the paint does not stick well to the Vaseline, as you can see here. And it makes sanding off that top part of the paint easy, and it gives it that worn, weathered look. Using the sanding sponge, I just went around the handle and the edges and removed some of that excess paint. And I had my layered paint. And I just love that look it gives. I printed out a couple of pages from the digital press, and I decided to use this Songbird Mercantile. When I'm using the rice paper from the digital press that I print out on a laser printer, I do not spray my paint before adhering it. I don't know if I'm worried that it's gonna smear or not. So I use the Fusion Decoupage gel to adhere the rice paper to the board. Once it was adhered, I gave it a top coat of the Decoupage medium. I feel like it helps seal it. And I did have a loose corner, so I just went back underneath it with some more gel. And I felt like I had a little bit of some wrinkle in there. So an easy fix for wrinkles when decoupaging, I cover the paper with parchment paper, and then using my Cricut hand press, my little mini, I just iron it out and the wrinkles are gone, and it helps really adhere that paper to the board. Using the finger sander, I just went around the edges in an up and down motion to remove the excess paper. I sealed Fusion does not need to be sealed, but the DIY paint does. So I sealed the project with the Antiquing Gel by Fusion. I coated the sides and the bottom. I let it sit, and I used the paper towel to remove the excess gel. And this can be either hung or can be used as another cute riser. For project 4, I found this decorative cutting board for, was it $3.99 at Goodwill? And I used the hand sander to sand off the top of the board and get rid of the Christmas trees or the pine trees. Using the chiffon by Rust-Oleum, I covered the top of the cutting board. And then I cut out a piece of the aviary masterboard, and I didn't film attaching it, decoupaging it on, but I used the same method. I sprayed it, and I used the Fusion decorative gel. I adhered the paper to the board and then used the finger sander to go around the board. I liked the wood look, so I chose not to paint the sides of the board. And I used the DIY liquid patina to seal the board. And then using my little weeding tool, I picked out the paper, or I punched out the paper, and I could either hang this board or I can use this for a riser also. I would love to know which one of these projects was your favorite, so please leave a comment below. I think my favorite was the digital press paper on the cutting board. And if you're not already receiving Sonnet's box, I can leave a link in the description below so you can skip that waiting list and start receiving your box now. If you found this video inspirational, please hit subscribe below and follow me along on my creative journey. Thank you.